Hello and welcome to today's Fabricator Live episode. Joining me, Tim Heston, Senior Editor of the Fabricator magazine. We're going to be chatting about FABTECH, what we saw there and how some of the things that were shared on the show floor might be carried over into the operations of our metal fabricating readers. And we'll also tie that in with what's coming up in our October issue because we have a pretty exciting publication coming out, and we hope you take a chance to look at it. So, Tim, how are you doing?
Oh, just fine. Yourself?
I'm doing well.
All right.
We actually spent the Thursday at FABTECH with some of the editors chatting about what we saw on the show floor and some of the things that might be of special interest to our metal fabricating readers. I guess I would ask you that question again, maybe for those people that didn't tune in that day. I think we had about 30 viewers that day, so obviously our world's a little bit larger than that.
The whole world.
Maybe if you can share some of the things you saw and some of the things that stood out that you think people might be interested in hearing about.
Well, I'll tell you, it was refreshing to get back into the hall. At the show, in the end, I had more than 24,000 visitors, and treading the show floor was kind of like me riding a bike. It felt right to get back in the midst of the technology. It seemed like all the fab shops I've talked to, all the fab shop owners I talked to, they are kind of at a point where they absolutely need to step up their automation game. Otherwise, they just cannot meet the demands of customers, especially the ones that were there. They were there to buy, and
Right.
a lot of fab shops, bought machines right off the floor. They absolutely need them in production as soon as possible because they just can't find the bodies to meet demand,
Right.
skilled or unskilled. At the same time, you have trepidation about material prices. A lot of fabricators are made gambles of basically hoarding a lot of raw stock because you can't deliver without raw stock.
Right.
And so the raw stock inventory was up. So that meant that the velocity through the shop floor had to be quick. They could not have work in process. That had to get through the floor. And so they needed automation to do that, whether it be automated material handling towers. There's more pick and place automation at the end of the laser line where it's coming off and you have pick and place out of the nest. And then, of course, automatic tool change press brakes were a big deal.
Right.
And
Right.
and underlying all that was kind of this focus on data and artificial intelligence and how to get automation to basically essentially program itself and become autonomous.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the highlights regarding that was a company called Path Robotics, which I'll be covering in the October issue. But basically, it was incredibly oversimplified. The robot can see what it's welding, compare it to the CAD model, make adjustments, and just do it.
Yeah. And it seems like that bottleneck has kind of been pushed toward the welding department now.
Oh, yeah.
You have your high power lasers cutting out blanks faster than they've ever done. The part sorting automation you mentioned is helping to kind of speed that up, gets it to the press brake folks who people are either doing the automatic tool changing investments or even robotic cells or just buying more modern press brakes that are able to kind of do the jobs more efficiently with offline programming, better controls. You saw a lot of that, what you're describing, Path Robotics, but also a lot of Cobots. I think one of my favorite parts of the show was when one of the traditional robotic guys said, this Cobot is actually allowing us to serve the high mix, low volume fab shop, which they had spent the last 15 years telling me they were doing that already. So, but yet this tool is something a little bit new, and it seemed like to be everywhere in the welding hall.
Oh yeah, and also in the fab hall on the end of one Cobot was sanding, but the most and let's be honest, most of it's UR. It's the dominant player in that field. But what was interesting about the Cobots too is that niche of automation is introducing a new kind of automation as a service or automation by the hour. But regarding Cobots, a lot of there are a few players out there, High Robotics being one of them, and a few others that rent Cobots by the hour, and it's automation by a service. So you no longer have that capital investment. And there was also another exhibitor there at the show, which we're also covering in the October issue, is a company called Formic, which
Yeah.
is also introducing another kind of financing method where it's basically automation by the hour. They purchase the assets and use special financing to purchase those assets, working through integrators. And this is not just Cobots; it's any integrator that can work with them. And their goal is to spread automation to that long tail of small fab shops that
Right.
the automation technology itself can handle the high mix. It's just the high bar of capital expense that's
Right.
very tough. So, and that's that, once that starts to permeate the industry, we're going to see some really interesting things happen.
Well, I think history suggests that some of this technology will work its way down simply because costs come down. And I think we've seen that over the years with the robotic cells, welding cells.
Right.
These are not the Cobots; these are the more traditional cells. But 10 years ago, probably didn't see them as much, but now you see them in shops with 50 or fewer people. And
Right.
Do you have a sense? We had talked about this previously, but that approach to that new approach to investing in that type of equipment, do you feel confident that it may have a real possibility of taking off, or fab shop owners are conservative a lot, so will they look upon this with skepticism?
Right. Yeah, it is. It is a leap, and so it might have some legs. It's a good time for it because you have a lot of fab shops. Let's be honest. We've got the passing of the torch to the younger generation
Right.
going on in this industry. So you have, on the one hand, they do need to be liquid, and because they need that raw stock, and they also need to pay payroll. So you can't make payroll with inventory, yet you can't produce anything without raw stock inventory. So
Right.
so this industry behooves, rewards people with conservative balance sheets. But with this new method of finance, it's not necessarily financing. It's a rental by the hour. So it's
Right.
the automation is no longer an asset of the company; it's an asset of another company.
Yeah.
Now that in itself is a leap. So time will tell whether it really takes off. The idea is incredible. Whether it has legs, we shall see. So.
Yeah. Well, investment is almost necessary, A, to keep up with economic opportunities in this expanding manufacturing economy, and B, to get around the reality of the situation. 10 minutes before we came on, one of our coworkers went to a Jimmy John's and it was closed for the week because they couldn't find people.
That's right.
So I guess that puts a new spin on Freaky Fast. Instead of Freaky Fast, frickin' closed. But you also were involved in another article for October where the theme of the feature addressed funding growth for shops and for people to keep up with even current commitments, but also to grow. These investments have to take place. So
Right.
touch upon what was covered in that feature.
Yeah, well, that was with White Oak Capital Advisors, which is what they call themselves, an alternative credit firm, and this guy was out of San Francisco. But it was just kind of a back to basics article about smart growth through debt financing,
Right.
and which means you don't want to get you don't want to leverage out too much, but on the other hand, you want to make smart use of debt so that you're growing as much as you can.
Yeah.
And the point of the article was that we're kind of at a precipice where the need for capital investment because of automation, because of AI, because of the Internet of Things, all this technology that is kind of on the cusp of permeating broadly throughout the industry. You need to invest, and so the shops that don't invest will be more likely to fall behind. Now, of course, that depends always on the niche that shop serves.
Yeah.
Like a couple of years ago, I talked to a dumbwaiter manufacturer, and very niche, and the processes they were totally honest with me. The processes on the shop floor were incredibly old-fashioned, and they were updating it, and they've entered the modern era. But it was their niche. The niche didn't demand anything else. But
so that ties in with the cover story in October, where I had the chance to speak with the folks at Lasernut, which is probably one of my favorite company names of all time.
Great name.
For those that didn't hear it the first time, Lasernut, Norco, California. company and company. The son is now owner, president of the company, but a joint father son endeavor. The father started selling industrial painting equipment in the area, and actually wanted to kind of expand their business a little bit. So they started into laser cutting. They get involved. The son has an interest in rock hopping, those type of dune buggy things that uh, they actually crawl over rock crawlers. So heavy duty suspension, heavy duty fabrication, and they had four laser cutting machines, CO2. So they weren't on the as you said, they didn't feel the pressure to invest early in the fiber cutting, and the owner told me there was a little hesitation because he saw the dross that was kind of an issue with the early generations of laser cutting. So they've recently invested in Mitsubishi 10 kilowatt laser. It's going to end up meeting the production of two of their old CO2s. And the CO2s are in the 4 kilowatt, 4.5 kilowatt range. And the ultimate goal is perhaps to bring in another, maybe even more high powered fiber laser cutting machine to replace the remaining two CO2 machines. But as you described, they're still unloading manually and loading manually. And he knows, it's in the back of his head, that they'll probably end up doing more automation related to that. But every fabricating company has its own pressures, own realities, and sometimes they don't have to be on that bleeding edge. A lot of people do. So I think you're exactly right when you're talking about the need for companies to invest. Everyone's on a different timetable.
Yeah, and that kind of dovetails into another story about what 5 traits of an optimal laser operator, which is also in the next issue. And we have all this automation, and the story is significant about, hey, we've got fiber lasers going up to 10, 20 kilowatts. There were even higher kilowatt lasers at the FABTECH show. It's just, it seems to be never ending. But with all that power comes a lot of crud on your slats.
Right.
And and also it comes with, laser cutting is inherently a dirty process. You cannot get around that. There are fumes, there's slag, there's molten metal that flies, and you can clean up your pierce. You can change the beam parameters. You can to widen the curve. The industry has gone wonders with cut quality. But you still have to scrub those slats, and you got to replace those slats, and you've got to inspect the bellows, and you got to inspect the cooling lines, and you got to know how to really change a cover glass carefully and quickly so that nothing is contaminated, and treat it as a pristine thing, not like you're just putting a lens cap on a camera. It's that article kind of hits on the basics where we've got all this fantabulous AI and automation and machine learning, but boy, you still need to have people to get their hands dirty. So.
Yeah, to go back to the Lasernut thing, one of the things that appealed to him with the newer machinery was that the equipment's ability to adjust when it sensed excessive dross being formed, and to change, alter those cutting parameters as it's cutting. But as you say, it still doesn't relieve the operator responsibility. And it's pretty incredible. I mean, we know what these people pay for these machines, and you would hope they would want to put somebody with some type of education or knowledge of what could go wrong, because when it does go wrong, if those people are having trouble just finding people to work for them, and we've heard it constantly. The machine tool manufacturers having difficulty finding tech support for people to go out, and nobody wants to be in that situation. So you're exactly right. The timing of those two articles in October are kind of it just makes total sense. There's a total relationship to that discussion, because automation does not get you away from responsibility.
Right.
You still need to be engaged.
And regarding tech support, there's like another tidbit in that laser cutting article where the laser tech told me, hey, how about having a cell phone extender on your shop floor? Because you wouldn't believe the amount of hours where techs from a vendor or independent maintenance tech or whomever you're working with, they have to walk outside the fab shop, call, walk back in, look at the sheet, what's going on, walk back out. Why? Because cell phone reception, a lot of interference in there. So it's like, hey, let's have either a landline or a cell extender. Doesn't cost much. It's
Right.
pennies compared to a 1.2 million or whatever dollar machine you're buying. So
Yeah.
it's those kind of basics that you know really
It's
drive.
the reality that people don't think about.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, do we have a question? We didn't open it up to questions.
Yeah, we have a comment.
Yeah.
From Stephen Craw. He says, at least in a job shop environment, it's automation is just necessary to keep up with the pricing game.
Yeah. So we have a comment from Steven, and he mentioned that the investment in automation is necessary to keep up, as he called it, the pricing game. And
Yeah.
in certain metro areas, and probably everywhere, but it could get cutthroat, I imagine, for certain
Right.
business. And
Yeah,
as with the automation, allows them to kind of minimize labor costs to it. So that makes total sense. Sometimes I wonder whether we're saying this, and maybe it's not reality, but it's good to hear somebody from the fabricating base kind of recognize the same thing.
All right,
Yeah.
Validation there. There you go.
There you go. There you go.
Well, another comment to that point is that, I mean, I know several fab shops who have invested in these 15, 20 kilowatt machines, and that has boosted their competitiveness, especially under certain like 3/8 and up. That they are not only they're serving as a service center for their own service centers,
Right.
To cut material. They're cutting material for various other shops because they can do what nobody else can. We're at that point now where there are these certain lasers that can cut faster, so much faster, that they can price so much better that they can almost become a laser service center. It almost harkens back to the 1980s when laser job shops first emerged onto the scene, and you just had a laser. Work would just come because you were the only game in town. We're kind of in that little window where the window probably won't last, I'm sure.
Yeah.
These machines will proliferate, but it's that interesting time where.
Well, it kind of ties in with the need to continually be on the cutting edge. You want to do something your your competitors don't do. And I've talked with one machine tool vendor where they believe that the emergence of these high powered lasers are actually taking business away from other technologies like water jet in particular.
Right.
The edges probably aren't as good, but those parts are being delivered probably 5 times faster, 6 times faster. It's it won't take all the water jet work, of course. There's heat affected zone issues, things like that, but it makes people think that there may be an alternative, and if the application allows it, it makes sense. Right. So it's rewriting the rules of who you can go after as a customer. It's all a matter of time and trying to figure out where what door you should knock on next.
Yeah, but a caveat to that too is no matter how amazing the shop floor technology is, shops I've talked to, and this was a big theme at the show too. Paperless Parts actually made a presentation to this. They had a Gantt chart on the screen. They said, "All right, here's order to ship. All right, how about RFQ to order release on the shop floor? How long does that take?"
Right.
And that's the volume game. Is if you can automate that, then and you can invest in flexible automation on the floor that can change over on the fly, then you've rewritten the minimum order quantities that have plagued a lot of low volume orders out there. You can really ramp up and scale up the job shop model. Maybe or not, we'll see. But we're kind of in that cusp of some shops. One shop in Utah, one shop in Nevada has these automated ordering systems. Of course, there's Proto Labs in New Hampshire that's had MyRapid for a while, and so it's just interesting to see that happen.
Do you think that opens the door to their ability to scale in a large way, more so than maybe a shop that doesn't have that type of connectivity? That type of intelligence embedded into their systems?
Well, it's happened in Europe with 24/7 Taylor Steel, where they've scaled up to become an almost 100 million. Well, last time I talked to them was about 55 million euro. That was 4 years ago at this point.
Right.
So who knows? But I've been to their website recently, and there's still a robust business.
Yeah.
But they've certainly scaled up, serving that long tail of 10, 15 orders. Of course, it's a different business model in Europe. There's so many more low volume demands because shorter distances to drive. They drive 4 pieces of sheet metal down the road to the next job. It's a different geography.
But we got another comment.
Yeah, just wondering if the investment in automation, pretty pricey, how is that working with shops that are trying to invest in new technology, but also trying to offset material prices?
Yeah. So so the question was raised. Shops trying to balance the need to invest with the reality of more capital being tied up in material.
Right.
We actually addressed that in October as well. Steel prices seem to have peaked, but they're not going to fall tremendously. It'll be a gradual retreat. We had a panel discussion at FABTECH, Tim,
Right,
and
Todd
maybe
Ludlow
comment on
talked
some of
about
the things that you included in your roundup, FABTECH roundup, kind of talking on this point.
Well, Todd Ludlow made comment to that point, and a few other folks.
And he's of Ludlow Manufacturing in Waukegan, Illinois.
Yeah. And he has a very good relationship with his bank. So there you go.
Yeah.
So there's local commercial banks are very important. So because he's doing both, he's buying more material and he's investing incredibly in technology. And that I think is where that automation of a service will really fit in, is that especially since automation changes or technology changes so rapidly. It's that especially on the software end of it, and sensing end of it too. We have sensors that on these machines, as you write about for the Mitsubishi machine, and of course all vendors have. You need to continually upgrade. So how do you continually upgrade to stay competitive, and yet still keep your balance sheet liquid and not be buried in machine payments? And I think automation as a service really has some legs to it because there's such a demand. There may be hesitation because it's kind of a far out concept, but we're in far out times. So who knows? So there you go.
Well put. So, the other thing Todd Ludlow mentioned was he has good relationships with his steel suppliers. And if you use enough, they'll keep you at the top of the list. And that ties in with a story that I covered involving Decimate Sales. They're involved in the retail industry, and it's kind of interesting if you've ever had to cover that, because there's not a lot of lead time. If I'm trying to, geez, man, my mind's blowing. What was the one? Kanye West. Kanye West drops a new shoe. The retailers need to respond quickly. And Decimate Sales built their business on that. And it's not only working with your retail giants, but it's also companies that act as the middleman to kind of create these metal retail racks and things like that. And they established a rapid response cell. So it's basically almost like a prototype cell where dedicated to that type of work, so they wouldn't have to tear down their other more job shop related work. But as Todd Ludlow mentioned, I had mentioned so your whole business in this aspect of it is built around rapid response. How do you get the material when it's some people are having issues with availability? And he goes, well, our service center is kind of right down the road, and we have a good relationship with them. So you can't minimize small things like that. Right. It's still a relationship business in almost all aspects to it, even though so much communication is now electric, digital. But it's still a people business in a way, even though it's dominated by metal. So I found that kind of amusing, and probably one of the reasons why I totally still like the industry, in that people are trying to figure out how to get things done. And
after all these years,
it's in a way it's changed dramatically, and in a way it's still just about getting metal to part to customer and.
But it certainly is about people. I stopped by at the FABTECH show. They brand themselves now as Fixture. It's a weld fixturing table.
Yeah.
But they are owned by Pioneer, which is it's an Amish company. I visited a year ago.
Yeah.
And they have built their business off relationships, like a lot of job shops have, about collaborating. But they collaborated tremendously with they had a hospital bed business they launched right after COVID, and we wrote a bit about it in the Fabricator. And the key thing to that business was that we liked about it. I mean, there were a lot of stories about hospital beds and everybody getting into that business during the COVID.
Right.
But then what happened was then it stopped. and
Yeah.
they didn't need any more. And so all of a sudden, we had these inventory or these orders or heck, these machines purchased for this order and never came through. Oh, geez. So, but with Pioneer, they collaborated. They had virtually no machine investment, no investments outlay, but they retooled their entire shop floor because they pride themselves on their flexibility. Had these flexible assembly cells, and as soon as demand dropped off a cliff, bam, stopped, and they didn't have any inventory left, and it was
Right.
fine. Now they had conceded they had learned some things, and it was some luck that was involved.
Right.
They were honest. They were like, man, whew, wow, we took a risk. But it also had to do with the lean atmosphere of their shop, just in time. Of course, this was before the huge material squeeze.
Right.
But because of that, and that's why they ended up going to the show, because they got so much business from that going to another show, I think it was ProMat, and they said, listen, we are off to the tilt with sales. Why would we go to FABTECH and exhibit and tread the floor, because they're a job shop as well. And they said, listen, you never know what kind of contacts you'll make at a trade show.
Right.
And it really just boosted our 2020 revenue ridiculously, all because we went to the show and made those serendipitous contacts.
Yeah.
I said, we're not going to, even though we're busy as all get out, we're not going to get past this up. And I think that's why we saw that's why we saw 24,000 people at FABTECH this year.
Yeah,
despite it all.
Yeah, I know people don't want to mention this, but that 24,000 was more than half. Like, it was half roughly of what was there in 2019 in Chicago. So they had 50,000 attendees, and even with that decrease in attendance, no one had. There were hardly any cries of negativity. People are I won't say in a jam. People were very much interested in purchasing equipment, and they're faced with opportunity, and given the many challenges, whether it's finding people, needing excess, needing more capacity, they were able to kind of at least begin that conversation at FABTECH. And in a way, I am constantly surprised. Fabricators love to go there. The idea, one of my favorite things is driving into McCormick Place garage and seeing all the pickup trucks like taking up the small parking spaces, and people are driving in, and no matter what they might think about Chicago, whether it's too pricey or too dangerous, they like being there for those couple 2-3 days. So it was a good celebration of our industry, no doubt. So yeah. So in conclusion, I'll say that you'll read a little bit about that in Tim's coverage of the post-show recap coverage, and also everything we've talked about. You can also find in an October issue. And unless we have any other comments from anybody,
it'll be all on fabricator.com too.
It'll be on the fabricator.com too as well. So I invite y'all to check that out. If you have heard anything and you have questions and or maybe story ideas, always let us know. We're interested in good leads. And thanks for joining, taking time out of your busy schedule, Tim. And thanks to everybody else who watched today. Y'all have a good one. See ya.
Bye-bye. See ya.